morning sun streamed through the windows of the small beauty salon, making the shampoo bottles lined up on the light wooden shelves shine. Emma Carter organized her cart of products with the same dedication as always, humming softly as she checked each item on her mental list. Her long and delicate fingers, marked by years of working with dyes and chemicals, glided over the bottles with care, as if each one held a special story. Her light blue apron, impeccably clean and pressed, had her name embroidered on the front pocket, a gift from her grandmother Margaret on her first day of work 3 years ago. The other hairstylists often commented on how Emma managed to keep that sincere smile on her face, even after 12 hours on her feet, attending to client after client without ever showing exhaustion. "Emma, dear, a lady just arrived for a hydration treatment," called Diana, the receptionist, interrupting her thoughts. Emma tucked a stray strand of her own brown hair behind her ear and answered with her usual enthusiasm, "Send her in, Diana." "I just prepared that special mask she loves." As she waited, her eyes landed on her phone, 3 unread messages from Margaret. Her heart tightened slightly as she read the messages from her grandmother, who needed help taking her blood pressure medication. "Grandma, I'm sorry for the delay. As soon as I finish with a client, I will stop by to help you with your medicine. I promise I will not take long," she replied quickly, feeling the weight of responsibility in her words. The salon walls held memories of every client Emma had transformed over the years. It was not just about haircuts or hairstyles, it was about women who arrived feeling down and left with renewed confidence. Margaret always said her granddaughter had a special gift. "You do not just style hair, my love. You mend hearts." Emma smiled at the thought of those words, especially on the hardest days when exhaustion threatened to overpower her determination. The salary was not the best, but it allowed her to take care of Margaret and still save a little for her dream of taking an advanced colorimetry course. Between clients, Emma checked her grandmother's messages, responding with affectionate emojis and comforting words. At 78 years old, Margaret was her only family since her parents had passed away in an accident 15 years ago. The elderly woman with silver hair and a warm smile had been her fortress, teaching her how to turn pain into strength and loneliness into determination. Now, it was Emma's turn to give back all that love. Even with tight finances and long working hours, she found joy in small moments. The stories Margaret told during dinner, the laughter they shared while watching their favorite soap operas, the long hugs before bedtime. "Emma, your grandmother called again," Diana whispered, approaching with a concerned look. She sounded a little anxious. Emma checked the time, only 2 clients left before her shift ended. Her fingers drummed nervously on the counter as she mentally calculated how long it would take to get home. "Do you think you can reschedule this client for tomorrow? I need to take my grandmother her medicine." Diana smiled understandingly. "Of course, dear. Family always comes first, right?" Emma felt tears of gratitude well up in her brown eyes. "Thank you, Diana. You are an angel." Quickly packing up her supplies, she could already imagine Margaret's relieved smile when she arrived home earlier. In those moments, Emma knew for sure every sacrifice was worth it when done out of love. The salon doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of Victoria Blake, a tall and elegant woman wearing designer sunglasses and heels that echoed across the floor. Her presence immediately altered the atmosphere of the room, as if the air had suddenly grown heavier. By her side, delicately holding her hand, was Lily, a 7-year-old girl with curious eyes and a floral dress. The contrast between mother and daughter was evident. While Victoria exuded a calculated coldness in every movement, Lily radiated an innocence that seemed to brighten the space around her. Diana, the receptionist, swallowed hard upon recognizing the client. Knowing Victoria was known for her demanding nature and constant complaints about even the smallest details. "Emma, dear, I need that magical touch of yours today," Victoria announced with an artificial smile, removing her sunglasses and revealing piercing green eyes. "Lily, sweetheart, why do you not go explore a little while Mommy gets her hair done?" The little girl nodded timidly, letting go of her mother's hand and beginning to wander through the salon with hesitant steps. Victoria settled into Emma's chair as if it were a throne, carefully adjusting her imported designer handbag on her lap with studied precision. "I want that special treatment only you can do. I have an important event tonight, "And I need to look stunning," she continued, watching through the mirror as Emma prepared her products. As Emma focused on mixing the perfect shades to achieve Victoria's desired color, little Lily wandered through the salon, seemingly enchanted by the various products and accessories on display. Victoria maintained an elaborate conversation about her busy social life, gesturing dramatically and ensuring that Emma's attention remained completely fixed on her endless stories about exclusive parties and charity events. However, her eyes discreetly followed her daughter's movements through the mirror's reflection, occasionally exchanging almost imperceptible signals with the girl. "And then I told a friend that I simply could not attend her dinner. Can you believe it? As if I did not have more important commitments," Victoria continued, her melodious voice serving as the perfect background noise. With impressive skill for someone so young, Lily executed her part of the silent choreography. Her small and agile fingers slid over carelessly open purses, collecting little treasures, a lipstick here, a pair of earrings there, while pretending to admire the fashion magazines scattered around the salon. Victoria perfectly timed her requests for adjustments to the color or the water temperature to ensure that Emma remained completely distracted in her work. "Emma, I think the water is a little too hot. Oh, and that shade is not exactly what I had in mind. Could you adjust it just a little?" she requested, keeping her eyes fixed on the mirror while Lily moved toward another unguarded purse. Time seemed to move in slow motion as the silent ballet between mother and daughter continued. Victoria orchestrated each moment with the precision of a conductor, her modulated voice creating the perfect distraction. "Lily, sweetheart, are you behaving?" she asked occasionally, always receiving a shy nod in response. The little girl had learned her role well in this family performance, moving like a small shadow among the distracted clients. The air conditioner hummed softly, blending with the sound of hairdryers and lively conversations, while personal belongings discreetly disappeared one by one in a reverse magic trick where the illusionist sought no applause, only the silent complicity between mother and daughter. The sun was beginning to set when a client left the salon visibly upset, returning minutes later with the owner of the establishment. "My pearl brooch is missing. I am sure it was in my purse," she exclaimed, drawing everyone's attention. Victoria, still sitting in Emma's chair, watched the commotion through the mirror and felt her heart race. Just a few more minutes and someone might make the connection to the small thefts that Lily carried out at her request. "You know, unfortunately, this is more common than we imagine," Victoria commented loudly, adjusting herself in the chair while Emma put away the coloring products. "Last week I read about several cases of employees stealing from clients in beauty salons." With calculated movements, she removed her valuable sapphire necklace from her neck, waiting for the perfect moment as the confusion spread through the room. The salon owner tried to calm the furious client, promising to investigate the matter. Victoria noticed that other women were beginning to check their purses, some whispering and discreetly glancing at Lily, who was already innocently playing near another client's bag. With her heart pounding, Victoria called her daughter. "Lily, come here immediately," her melodic voice masking the growing panic. Taking advantage of the general distraction, Victoria passed near Emma's purse, which was momentarily resting on the counter. With the precision of years of practice, she slipped the necklace inside, while discreetly taking another stolen object from Lily's hand. "This situation is truly unfortunate," she commented loudly, her expression a mask of false concern. "Maybe they should check the employees' bags, do you not think?" Victoria's suggestion seemed to spark an idea in the salon owner's mind, who immediately ordered all employees to place their bags on the main counter. Victoria kept a firm hand on Lily's shoulder, silently preventing her daughter from saying anything incriminating. The little girl trembled slightly, confused by the situation, but years of conditioning kept her quiet. The decisive moment came when Emma's purse was opened. The sapphire necklace gleamed against the dark fabric of the lining, exactly where Victoria had planted it. "What is this?" the salon owner exclaimed, holding up the jewelry. Emma's face lost all color. "No, that is not mine. I would never—" Victoria watched the scene, perfectly playing the role of a shocked client, while other women were already pulling out their phones to call the police. The sound of sirens began to echo in the distance, and Victoria pulled Lily closer, whispering words of false comfort as she watched Emma fall apart. Her plan had not only diverted attention from Lily's small thefts, but it had also created the perfect distraction for her future schemes. The only witness to her true nature was her own daughter, too young to fully understand the weight of what she had just witnessed, too little to realize she had been used as the centerpiece of yet another one of her mother's elaborate deceptions. The inside of the police station was cold and impersonal, with fluorescent lights making the gray walls seem even more oppressive. Emma, seated in an uncomfortable chair in the interrogation room, had her wrists handcuffed and her face stained with tears that would not stop falling. Her Salon uniform, once so neatly pressed, was now wrinkled after the chaos of the arrest, and the apron with her embroidered name had been collected as evidence, an added humiliation that made her heart ache even more. "Please, you have to believe me." Her voice trembled as she tried to explain herself for the 10th time to the investigators. "I would never steal from anyone. My grandmother depends on me. She needs her medication." The older investigator adjusted his glasses, coldly looking at the notes on his desk. "Miss Carter, the necklace was found in your purse. We have several witnesses who confirmed this, including the owner of the establishment." "How do you explain that?" he asked in a monotone voice, as if he had heard the same story 1,000 times before. The interrogation room seemed to shrink with every passing minute. Emma tried to maintain her composure, but her hands trembled uncontrollably as she watched the prosecutor organizing a pile of documents on the other side of the table. The man, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, wore an almost imperceptible smile, pleased with how easy the case was. "Your Honor," he addressed the judge on duty through a video call, "this is a clear case of grand theft. The defendant was caught in possession of high-value jewelry, has a low-income job, and therefore has a clear motive for the crime. I request preventive detention to ensure she does not commit further offenses." Emma's thoughts raced as she struggled to comprehend how her life had fallen apart in just a matter of hours. That morning, she had been making plans for her colorimetry course. Now she was facing the real possibility of spending the night in jail. "Margaret," she whispered, suddenly remembering her grandmother alone at home, probably desperate for news. The tears returned with full force, blurring her vision as she imagined the elderly woman trying to manage on her own with her medication and daily needs. The public defender assigned to her case had barely spoken 2 words to her before the custody hearing. Now he was flipping through a thin folder absent-mindedly, clearly unprepared to mount any substantial defense. "Your Honor," he began without much enthusiasm, "my client has no criminal record and has a fixed residence. Additionally, she is the sole caregiver of her elderly and ill grandmother. I request that she be granted provisional release under the condition that she attends all court proceedings." Emma clung to those words as if they were her last hope, silently praying that the judge would show some compassion. The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. The judge, visible through the computer screen, analyzed the documents with a severe expression, occasionally casting sharp glances at Emma through the camera. Finally, her metallic voice echoed through the speakers. "Considering the severity of the offense and the necessity of ensuring the enforcement of criminal law, I grant the prosecution's request. I hereby order the preventive detention of the accused." The words hit Emma like a punch to the stomach, making her collapse onto herself in the chair, sobbing uncontrollably as the officers approached to take her to the holding cell. The last rays of sunlight filtered through the lace curtains of the small living room, where Margaret sat in her favorite armchair, waiting for news of her granddaughter. The phone on her lap remained silent, indifferent to her growing anxiety. The blood pressure medication, which should have been taken hours ago, sat untouched on the kitchen table. Emma always helped her with the correct dosages, and Margaret feared taking the medication alone and making a mistake. The silence in the house was interrupted only by the ticking of the old clock on the wall, mercilessly marking each minute of waiting. Margaret tried to stand up once more, her trembling legs barely supporting her weight. She needed to reach the medicine, but the world around her began to spin dangerously. Her breathing became increasingly difficult, dark spots danced in her vision, and cold sweat trickled down her wrinkled forehead. The fragmented words of the salon receptionist still echoed in her mind. Emma arrested, theft. Margaret could not comprehend. Her Emma, so honest, so dedicated, would never do such a thing. She tried once more to reach for the phone that had fallen to the floor, but her legs finally gave out. The impact of her fall reverberated through the silent apartment, knocking over the picture frame from the side table. The The photo of Emma smiling on her first day at the salon now lay shattered on the floor, just like the dreams they had shared. The world spun faster around Margaret. Her mouth was dry and her heart pounded irregularly in her chest. She tried to call for help, but her voice came out as nothing more than a hoarse whisper. The walls seemed to close in on her, and the air grew thinner. In her final moments of consciousness, Margaret thought of Emma, her little Emma, now alone in a cold jail cell. A single tear rolled down her wrinkled face as darkness began to envelop her. The sound of the fall, however, did not go unnoticed. In the apartment next door, the second-floor neighbor paused her soap opera when she heard the dull thud through the thin wall. Something in her gut told her that something was wrong. Margaret had lived alone since Emma started working, and she knew the elderly woman often struggled with her medication. After a few minutes of hesitation, she decided to check. Her knocks on the door went unanswered. Pressing her ear against the wood, she managed to hear a faint groan coming from inside. Without a second thought, she used the spare key Margaret had entrusted her for emergencies, and this certainly seemed like one. The sight that met her made her heart tighten. Margaret lay on the floor, pale and semi-conscious, surrounded by shards of the broken picture frame. With trembling hands, the neighbor grabbed her phone and dialed for emergency services, while holding Margaret's cold hand between hers. "Hang in there, Mrs. Margaret," she whispered, noticing the untouched medication in the kitchen and realizing the gravity of the situation. "Help is on the way. I will take care of you until Emma returns." The last hours of the day had already faded when Victoria returned to the salon, this time without her expensive jewelry, wearing a more modest outfit that perfectly matched her carefully rehearsed expression of sorrow. The establishment was still buzzing with the events of the day, employees whispering in small groups, clients calling to inquire about the scandal. Lily followed her mother's steps in silence, her small eyes observing everything with a mixture of confusion and concern. "It is truly a terrible situation," Victoria declared to the salon owner, her melodic voice heavy with false sympathy. "I never imagined something like this could happen here. Emma seemed so trustworthy." Her words were carefully chosen, each syllable dripping with venom disguised as honey, while her hands gestured gracefully, emphasizing her performance. The employees gathered around her, drawn in by her presence, as she continued her elaborate tale of how she had noticed subtle signs of suspicious behavior. While Victoria kept her audience captivated with her fabricated stories, Lily wandered through the nearly empty salon, her quiet steps leading her to the small office in the back. Through the slightly open door, she watched as her mother entered a few minutes later, using the excuse of needing to touch up her makeup away from curious eyes. Victoria did not notice her daughter's presence as she opened her designer handbag, revealing a hidden compartment filled with jewelry, some of which Lily recognized from the clients that afternoon. The little girl's heart pounded as she saw her mother methodically organizing the sparkling objects, sorting them by size and apparent value. Victoria murmured to herself, planning her next moves, as she slipped a delicate ring into a velvet-lined box. Lily wanted to ask why they were doing this, why Emma had to be taken away by the police, but years of conditioning kept her silent, watching with eyes that grew heavier with understanding. "Lily, sweetheart, where are you?" Victoria's voice echoed down the hallway, making the girl instinctively retreat from the shadows of the office. When her mother found her, the smile she received was the same as always, sweet on the surface but carrying a silent warning in its edges. "Come, love. We need to show our support in this difficult moment," Victoria declared, guiding her daughter back to the main salon, where she would continue her performance as the indignant yet compassionate client. The night progressed, and Victoria remained at the salon consoling the owner, offering suggestions on improving security, always keeping Lily close as a charming accessory to her elaborate act. When they finally left the salon, Victoria adjusted her expensive coat, satisfied with her performance of the day. In the car, as they drove away from the scene of the crime, Victoria opened her purse to reapply her lipstick, and several pieces of jewelry glistened under the streetlights. Lily watched the shimmering reflections on the car window, her small eyebrows furrowed in confusion. The silence of the night was broken by her innocent, childlike voice. "Mommy, why do you have so many hidden jewels?" The sound of that question made Victoria freeze, her lipstick stopping halfway to her lips. as her eyes met her daughter's through the rearview mirror. The Blake mansion cast long shadows at the end of that afternoon as Victoria walked through the luxurious hallways with firm steps, deliberately ignoring Lily's repeated attempts to get her attention. The little girl followed her mother like a small shadow, her unanswered questions weighing heavier on her young heart. The echo of Victoria's heels against the marble floor blended with Lily's soft voice, as she kept asking about the events at the salon, about Emma, about the jewelry she had seen hidden inside her mother's purse. "Mommy, did Emma really do something wrong? Why were there jewels in your purse yesterday if I did not put anything there? Does her mommy also ask her to do those things?" Lily insisted, her voice trembling slightly as she watched her mother methodically organize a series of documents on her mahogany desk. Victoria finally turned to her daughter, her face a mask of barely contained irritation. "Lily, dear, how many times do I have to tell you that certain questions should not be asked? Well-behaved children do not question their mothers." Her words, though soft on the surface, carried a sharp tone that made Lily instinctively step back. The atmosphere of the house, usually cold and impersonal, felt even more frigid at that moment. Victoria continued her tasks, deliberately ignoring her daughter's hurt expression as she discreetly placed a small velvet box inside a locked drawer. Lily remained in the middle of the office, her small hands nervously gripping the hem of her dress, watching every calculated movement her mother made. The silence between them was dense, filled with unspoken questions and hidden truths. "If you keep asking these silly questions, Lily, I will have to cancel your ballet lessons." Victoria pronounced each word with surgical precision, without even looking at her daughter. "And you do not want to disappoint Mommy, do you?" The veiled threat hung in the air like a dark cloud, making Lily's eyes well up with restrained tears. The little girl swallowed hard, years of conditioning teaching her to suppress her doubts, to bury her questions, along with the growing sense that something was deeply wrong with her mother's behavior. Life at the Blake mansion continued as usual, but Lily's sharp eyes were beginning to notice patterns in her mother's actions that had once gone unnoticed. During breakfast, Victoria spoke on the phone in her sweetest voice, cancelling appointments with different elaborate excuses. "I have a terrible migraine," she told one person, while minutes later she claimed to have an unavoidable commitment to another. Lily watched in silence, stirring her cereal as she took note of every new story her mother invented. Mornings turned into a sequence of carefully orchestrated lies. Victoria created intricate alibis with the same ease that she selected her expensive clothes. "Tell your teacher you were sick yesterday," she instructed Lily after skipping school for no real reason. "If anyone asks, we spent the afternoon at the doctor's office." The little girl carried a growing burden in her small heart, feeling trapped in a web of false stories that grew thicker each day. A particularly unsettling pattern began to emerge during their visits to elegant establishments. Victoria always chose precise moments, when the staff was distracted or busy with other customers. With practiced and discreet movements, her hands slid jewelry and small valuable objects into her designer purse. Lily watched everything through the reflection of mirrors and display cases, her stomach twisting each time she witnessed another theft. At home, Victoria had a meticulous ritual. Locked inside her closet, believing herself to be alone, she organized her new treasures in hidden compartments. But Lily, who knew every corner of the mansion, found ways to observe without being seen. Through a crack in the door, she saw her mother admiring the stolen objects, categorizing them with the precision of a collector, completely unaware that her own daughter was witnessing every moment of her criminal routine. One particularly grey morning found Lily sitting at her desk during recess, picking at her untouched lunch. Her teacher, Ms. Helena, noticing her unusually quiet behavior, observed the girl for a few moments before approaching. The invisible weight pressing down on Lily's small shoulders was impossible to ignore, especially for someone who had dedicated her life to understanding the subtle emotions of children. "Lily, would you like to tell me what is making you so quiet today?" the teacher asked gently, pulling up a chair to sit beside her student. Her kind eyes met Lily's, which seemed burdened with a concern far beyond her 7 years. The little girl nervously pressed her fingers against the edge of the table, struggling with words that felt too heavy for her small tongue. "Miss Helena, how do we know when a grown-up is doing something wrong?" she finally murmured, her voice barely a whisper. Helena felt a shiver run down her spine at the unexpected question. Carefully, she chose her next words. "You know, Lily, sometimes adults make mistakes too. The important thing is to always try to do what is right." The girl bit her lower lip, her eyes starting to glisten with held-back tears. But what if someone takes things that do not belong to them, and then pretends they did not? Lily continued, each word seeming to cost her a great effort. The teacher felt her heart tighten as she watched the internal struggle written all over her student's face. Gently, she began to tell a story about honesty, using simple examples a child could understand. She spoke about how lies, even small ones, can hurt people, and how the truth, though sometimes difficult, is always the best path. Lily listened intently, her large eyes fixed on her teacher's face, absorbing every word like a sponge. "When we see something wrong happening," Helena continued, her voice soft but firm, "we have a responsibility to do what is right, even if it is hard, even if we are scared." Her words seemed to resonate deep within Lily, who now played absent-mindedly with the bracelet on her wrist, a gift from her grandfather Henry, she explained in a whisper. The teacher noticed how the mention of her grandfather's name brought a different light to Lily's eyes, a mix of longing and comfort. As their conversation continued, Helena sensed that something much more serious was happening in her young student's life. Lily's questions, though vague, carried a weight that made the teacher's concern grow. With patience, she kept guiding the girl about the importance of honesty, about how good people sometimes need courage to do what is right, even when it is difficult. The bell signaling the end of recess rang in the distance, but Helena remained seated beside Lily, feeling that this moment was too important to interrupt. The little girl seemed to be fighting an internal battle, her small hands now gripping her grandfather's bracelet tightly. Finally, in a trembling voice that carried all the weight of her confusion and fear, Lily looked into her teacher's eyes. "Grandpa Henry always said we should do what is right. But what if Mummy gets mad at me?" The courtroom was filled with a palpable tension that morning. The dark wooden benches occasionally creaked under the weight of the audience, settling in to watch the trial, while the natural light streaming through the tall windows cast elongated shadows on the polished floor. Emma, sitting beside her public defender, looked smaller and more fragile in her simple clothes, a stark contrast to the studied elegance of Victoria Blake, who awaited her turn to testify. The judge, a man with a stern expression, presided over the session with a formality that made the air feel even heavier. Victoria walked to the witness stand with measured steps, her impeccable posture conveying the image of a wounded woman maintaining her dignity. Her light grey suit, carefully chosen to appear modest yet elegant, perfectly complemented her performance as the victim. After taking the oath, she adjusted herself in the chair, allowing a shadow of calculated vulnerability to cross her perfectly made-up face. Her hands, adorned only with a discreet wedding ring, rested delicately on her lap, completing the image of a respectable woman unjustly wronged. "Mrs. Blake," the prosecutor began, his deep voice echoing through the courtroom, "can you describe your relationship with the defendant?" Victoria tilted her head slightly, a single, perfectly timed tear sliding down her cheek. "I had been going to that salon for over a year." Her voice trembled just the right amount. "Emma always showed such dedication, such professionalism. I truly trusted her, you know. I would leave my jewelry, my personal belongings there without a second thought. I never imagined that she could." Her voice strategically broke as she delicately dabbed the tear away with a silk handkerchief. Emma's public defender shifted uncomfortably in his seat, aware of the powerful impression Victoria was making on the jury. His client, on the other hand, kept her eyes fixed on the table in front of her, her hands trembling slightly as she listened to every carefully crafted lie. Victoria continued her testimony, her voice now laced with controlled indignation. "That day when I realized my necklace was missing, I was in shock. It was a family heirloom, passed down for generations. The sentimental value is immeasurable." Her words were chosen with surgical precision, each syllable designed to provoke sympathy. Victoria's performance reached its peak when the prosecutor asked her to identify the necklace presented as evidence. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the piece, her eyes shining with restrained tears. "Yes, this is the necklace. My mother wore it at her wedding, just like my grandmother before her. The lie flowed from her lips with the smoothness of poisoned honey as her fingers caressed the sapphires she had, in truth, purchased only weeks earlier. The jury watched attentively, completely drawn into her masterful act, while Emma remained silent, her hopes dwindling with every word spun into the intricate web of lies. "Can you describe how you felt when you discovered that Emma had betrayed your trust?" the prosecutor asked, offering Victoria the perfect cue for her grand finale. The courtroom fell into expectant silence. All eyes were fixed on the woman sitting in the witness chair, waiting for her response. Victoria lowered her chin slightly, wavering between fragility and strength, a rehearsed movement that made it seem as though she was struggling with her emotions. She paused for a moment, allowing the tension to build like an invisible knot in the air. She took a deep breath, making sure the trembling exhale was loud enough for the jurors on the far end of the room to hear. "I felt devastated," she said, her voice breaking at the exact moment, a calculated crack adding to the drama of her statement. She closed her eyes for a brief instant, as if reliving the shock of the supposed betrayal. Not just for the material loss, but for the betrayal itself. Her voice wavered, a subtle touch of anguish adding weight to her words. "I trusted her. I allowed her to not only care for my hair, but also for priceless family heirlooms. To see someone you place so much trust in simply steal from you." She let the sentence hang in the air, the impact rippling through the room. Then, in a meticulously timed gesture, she covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders began to tremble in silent sobs, sobs that echoed louder than any shout in the courtroom, now completely frozen. The judge observed in silence. The jurors exchanged glances, and the hushed murmurs from the audience confirmed that Victoria had achieved the desired effect. The afternoon dragged on in the small apartment where Margaret waited, seated in her worn-out armchair, hoping for news about Emma's trial. The only sounds breaking the silence were the ticking of the old clock and the distant hum of the fan. Her wrinkled hands trembled as she tried to reach for the glass of water on the side table, but the dizziness overwhelming her made every movement a struggle. The blood pressure medication, which should have been taken hours ago, remained untouched in the kitchen. Emma always helped her with the correct dosages, and Margaret feared making a fatal mistake if she tried to take them on her own. Cold sweat trickled down her forehead as she fought to stay conscious. With trembling fingers, Margaret tried once again to dial the number of the beauty salon. The phone rang endlessly, each unanswered tone deepening her distress. "Please, someone answer," she murmured to herself, her voice weak, barely audible in the empty apartment. After several failed attempts, the phone slipped from her shaking hands, falling onto the carpet with a dull thud that seemed to echo through the quiet space. The pressure in her chest grew stronger with each passing minute, and dark spots began to dance in her vision. Margaret knew she needed help urgently. The neighbor in the apartment next door, a young mother who occasionally brought her leftovers from dinner, might be able to assist. With an almost inhuman effort, Margaret attempted to stand up from the armchair, leaning heavily on its arms for support. Her legs, however, felt like jelly, refusing to hold her weight. After several failed attempts, she collapsed back into the chair, gasping for breath. The world around her started spinning alarmingly fast, and she could feel her heart beating irregularly in her chest. The lace curtains Emma had hung swayed gently with the breeze from the half-open window, casting shadows that distorted in her blurred vision. The pain in her chest intensified, radiating down her left arm in a way she knew was dangerous. Summoning what little strength she had left, Margaret tried knocking on the wall that separated the apartments, hoping the sound would catch her neighbor's attention, but her weak knocks were too faint to be heard. The minutes dragged on like hours, as Margaret fought against the darkness threatening to consume her. Her once strong and resilient body now felt like a fragile prison, refusing to respond to her commands. Every muscle trembled. Every attempt to move was thwarted by the relentless weakness overtaking her limbs. The photographs on the walls, frozen moments of happiness with Emma, seemed to watch her with silent concern. Each one held a piece of her history, a trace of the love and strength she had shared with her granddaughter. There were smiles from birthdays, embraces on difficult days, glances of pride and complicity. But now those images felt distant, almost unreal, as if they belonged to another life. The air in the apartment grew heavier, dense like an invisible veil pressing against her chest. Every breath was a monumental effort, every heartbeat more irregular. The phone, lying just inches from her trembling fingers, felt as unreachable as an ocean away. She tried one last time to reach for it, moving her hand with the last bit of strength she had left, but her fingertips grasped only empty air. Her clouded eyes slowly began to close. "Emma," she whispered to the empty apartment, her voice nearly inaudible. A single tear slipped down her wrinkled face. "Forgive me for not being strong enough," the silence answered. And then the darkness took over. From a small radio near the teacher's lounge, news of Emma's trial played, capturing Lily's attention as she passed through the hallway. The girl stopped abruptly upon recognizing the broadcast about a witness, Victoria Blake, tearfully testifying against the hairdresser. Every word her mother spoke made Lily's stomach twist, especially because she knew the truth behind those false tears. Ms. Helena, who was preparing materials for her next class, noticed the sudden change in her students' behavior. "Lily," the teacher called softly, approaching the girl who remained frozen in front of the television. Lily's ears were locked onto the radio, her small hands gripping the straps of her backpack so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Helena could feel the tension radiating from the child as she watched Victoria describe in carefully rehearsed detail how she had been betrayed by Emma. Lily's face grew paler with each new lie her mother told so effortlessly. "I need to go home," Lily suddenly whispered, her voice shaking. Miss Helena knelt beside her, noticing the tears forming in the little girl's eyes. "Lily, do you want to talk about what is bothering you?" she asked gently, but the child only shook her head, quickly turning away before running down the hallway. Helena watched her student leave, a deep concern growing in her chest as she realized how much weight this little girl was carrying. After a few hours now at home, Lily ran up the stairs, her heart pounding as her mother's words from the courtroom echoed in her mind. As she passed Victoria's bedroom, something caught her attention. The closet door was slightly open, something unusual, since her mother always kept it locked. Driven by a mix of curiosity and fear, Lily stepped silently into the fragrant space. Her eyes scanned the neatly arranged shelves until a metallic gleam caught her attention from behind a stack of shoeboxes. With trembling hands, Lily pushed the boxes aside, her heartbeat racing. The air in the closet felt heavier, as if the truth had been waiting there all along, hidden, just waiting to be discovered. As her fingers slid across the dusty surfaces of the stacked boxes, she felt something different, a rigid, cool texture, slightly worn by time. She swallowed hard before pushing aside the objects that concealed her discovery. And then she saw it. There, partially hidden between shoeboxes and old scarves, rested a jewelry box larger than any she had ever seen in their home. The dark, cracked leather of the lid revealed its age, and the golden clasps were dull, but still gleamed under the soft light filtering through the closet door. Lily hesitated for a moment. Something inside her begged her not to open it, to pretend she had never found it. But another part, the part that carried her grandfather Henry's teachings, the part that knew the difference between right and wrong, made her take a deep breath and lift the lid. Her eyes widened. The interior of the box sparkled with dozens of necklaces, rings, bracelets, and brooches, each piece more extravagant than the last, shimmering under the faint light filtering through the door's cracks. She recognized some of the jewelry from Emma's Salon clients, and then her gaze stopped on one specific brooch, the one that had gone missing days before the incident that ruined Emma's life. The truth hit Lily like a punch to the stomach. Her legs felt weak, and she had to steady herself against the shelves to keep from falling. There, between her trembling fingers, was the undeniable proof of her mother's lies. The autumn morning bathed the schoolyard in a golden glow, as children ran and played during recess. Lily sat alone on a wooden bench, absent-mindedly swinging her legs that barely reached the ground, watching dry leaves dance with the gentle breeze. Her thoughts drifted far away, still troubled by the discovery she had made the night before in her mother's closet, when the sound of familiar voices pulled her back to reality. Two of her classmates had settled on the nearby bench, completely unaware of her presence, eagerly sharing the latest gossip they had overheard at home. "My mom said the hairdresser stole a really expensive necklace," one of them said, her voice filled with childish excitement at the scandal. "She pretended to be nice, but she was tricking everyone all along." The other girl nodded eagerly, adding details she had heard from her own mother. Mine always suspected her. She says poor people always want what is not theirs. The words hit Lily like tiny needles, making her stomach twist with sudden nausea. Her small hands gripped the edge of the bench so tightly that her fingers turned pale. The noise of the playground seemed to fade, as if all other voices had been muffled by a heavy blanket, leaving only the cruel words of her classmates echoing in her ears. They say she has been stealing for a long time, but no one noticed. One of them continued, clearly pleased to have her friend's full attention. My mom said that Mrs. Blake, that rich lady, was really brave for reporting her. Lily felt her cheeks burn with a mix of shame and anger, not at Emma, but at her own mother, who had spun this web of lies so masterfully that even innocent children repeated her falsehoods as absolute truth. The sound of the girls laughing as they discussed how Emma probably used the stolen money to buy expensive clothes made Lily feel a sharp pain in her chest. She knew Emma from the salon and remembered how the hairdresser always had a kind smile and gentle words, even when she was exhausted after a long day of work. The memory of Emma's warm face contrasted painfully with the cruel accusations now spreading through the schoolyard, circulating like a virus among children who had no idea of the truth behind the story. The dry leaves continued their dance in the wind, swirling through the schoolyard, indifferent to the whirlwind of emotions stirring in Lily's heart. They scattered across the ground like pieces of an endless autumn, gliding smoothly over benches and grass, creating a silent contrast to the storm building inside the little girl. Lily lowered her head and looked at her own hands, small and delicate, but now feeling as heavy as the burden she carried. How many times had those same hands been used to take objects from other people, guided by her mother's soft yet firm orders? How many times had she believed she was simply helping, without understanding the real consequences of her actions? The weight of guilt and shame seemed to grow with each passing second, pressing against her chest, becoming almost unbearable as the distant voices of her classmates echoed through the yard. They laughed, they talked, and without knowing the truth, they continued to spread lies about Emma. "What did you expect? A thief will always be a thief," one of them whispered, and Lily felt her stomach turn. The bell signaling the end of recess rang in the distance, a sharp sound that would normally send her running back to the classroom. But Lily did not move. Her body was paralyzed by the suffocating realization that her mother had not only stolen jewelry, she had stolen the dignity and freedom of an innocent person. And now, Lily held the truth in her small hands, knowing that if she remained silent, she too would be stealing something. Emma's chance to get her life back. Victoria's bedroom remained silent as Lily approached the hidden jewelry box, her small steps nearly inaudible on the soft carpet. The late afternoon light filtered through the silk curtains, casting dancing shadows that seemed to watch her every move. Her fingers trembled as they touched the ornate surface of the box, feeling every carved detail in the old wood. The weight of guilt swelled in her chest, like a bubble ready to burst at any moment, as memories of the thefts at the beauty salon flooded her mind. Her grandfather Henry's voice echoed in her thoughts, as clear as if he were still there, sitting in his favorite chair. Good people do what is right, even when no one is watching. Lily could see his gentle smile, remember the warmth of his hugs and the firm way he always spoke about honesty. Tears blurred her vision as she slowly lifted the lid of the box, revealing the sparkle of the dozens of stolen jewels her mother had accumulated over the months. Each piece now felt like a heavy weight on her conscience. The setting sun cast golden reflections on the jewelry, creating a spectacle of lights that might have once seemed magical, but now only intensified the conflict in her young heart. Lily recognized the pearl brooch she had taken from an elderly woman's purse, the sapphire ring her mother had instructed her to borrow from a distracted young woman, the necklace that had sent Emma to prison. Her small hands trembled even more as she touched each piece, remembering the faces of the people they had stolen from, people who trusted them and visited the salon, unaware that they were victims of such a cruel scheme. "What is right is not always easy, little one," her grandfather Henry used to say, adjusting his gold-rimmed glasses while sharing his wisdom. The confusion inside Lily grew like a storm, mixing the love she felt for her mother with the growing certainty that they had done something terribly wrong. Victoria had been her only family since her grandfather passed, but her actions contradicted everything Henry had taught about integrity and honesty. The conflict between family loyalty and moral conscience felt too heavy for her small heart to bear. The shadows in the room stretched as the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, painting the walls in shades of gold and blue. The only sound breaking the silence was the rhythmic ticking of the small clock on the dresser, a noise that would normally go unnoticed, but now seemed to amplify the unrest inside Lily. She remained seated in front of the open box, her eyes fixed on the cold shine of the jewelry lying there, like an inescapable reminder of the dilemma she carried. Her heart beat slowly, heavily, as if each thump echoed her indecision. Without realizing it, her fingers slid to the bracelet her grandfather had given her, his last gift before he passed. The simple yet meaningful piece always brought a sense of comfort, as if Henry was still close, guiding her. "The truth always finds its way to the light," he used to say, his deep and gentle voice still echoing in her memory. But now those words felt heavier than ever. Lily lifted her gaze and met her own reflection in the vanity mirror. Her large eyes, filled with doubt, searched for something in the image before her, a sign, an answer. But what she saw was more than just her own face. She saw the disappointed look her grandfather would have if he knew what his daughter and granddaughter had done. The weight of that thought tightened her chest. She took a deep breath and gently closed the box. The decision had already been made inside her, even if fear still whispered doubts. But Henry always said that courage was not the absence of fear, it was moving forward despite it. Lily's backpack felt heavier that morning, not just from the physical weight of the jewelry box, but from the emotional burden she carried. Throughout the school day, she struggled to focus on her lessons, her thoughts constantly returning to the forbidden treasure hidden among her notebooks and schoolbooks. Every movement of the backpack produced a soft clinking of jewelry, a sound that only she seemed to notice but that echoed in her ears as a constant reminder of her self-imposed mission. As the other students excitedly ran toward the school exit at the end of the day, Lily remained seated at her desk, her small hands nervously gripping the straps of her backpack. Mrs. Helena was organizing some papers at her desk, occasionally casting concerned glances at her student, who seemed so unlike her usual self. The silence of the empty classroom amplified every rapid beat of Lily's heart until she finally gathered the courage to stand up and walk over to the teacher's desk. "Miss Helena," her voice came out as a whisper, "can I show you something?" Helena immediately noticed the tremor in the girl's hands and the way she held her backpack against her chest, as if she were carrying something both precious and dangerous at the same time. With a gentle smile, the teacher pulled out a chair for Lily to sit beside her. "Of course, sweetheart. What do you want to show me?" The sound of empty chairs creaking in the breeze from the open window seemed to heighten the tension of the moment. With slow, careful movements, Lily began unzipping her backpack. Her hands were shaking so much that she had to try several times before she managed to pull the zipper all the way down. Helena watched in silence, her concern growing with each passing second. When Lily finally pulled out the ornate box, she hesitated for a moment, her eyes meeting the teacher's with a mixture of fear and determination. "Promise you will not be mad at me?" she asked in a voice so small it was barely audible. Helena felt her heart tighten at the vulnerability so evident in her student. "I will not be mad, Lily. You can trust me," she responded softly, keeping her voice calm despite the growing apprehension she felt. With one last moment of hesitation, Lily lifted the lid of the box. The jewels inside reflected the afternoon light, casting tiny rainbows across the classroom walls. Helena's eyes widened as she recognized several pieces she had seen on the news about the thefts at the beauty salon, including the infamous necklace that had led to Emma's arrest. A chill ran down the teacher's spine as her mind quickly connected the dots. The change in Lily's behavior, her persistent questions about right and wrong, Victoria Blake's testimony that she had watched on television. Helena felt the air in the room grow heavier, as if the world around her had slowed while her mind processed the gravity of what lay before her. The jewelry box sat open between them, its worn wooden edges contrasting with the luxurious sparkle of the contents inside. Each piece gleamed under the soft light from the window, reflecting a deceptive splendor. Gold necklaces, rings encrusted with gemstones, intricately designed earrings. Objects that belonged to people who would never have them back if it were not for this 7-year-old child, now holding them in her trembling hands. The weight of the discovery struck Helena like an invisible blow, overwhelming in its intensity. Her hesitant fingers reached for one of the jewels, touching it delicately, as if the contact could solidify the terrible reality that her mind had already accepted. The cold metal against her skin felt as real as the tight knot forming in her throat. Lily, still sitting in front of her, watched her teacher with wide, anxious eyes, waiting for a reaction. Her breathing was shallow, almost inaudible, as if she were bracing for punishment. Helena looked at the girl and understood the burden she carried. Her heart ached. "Lily," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "This changes everything." Lily lowered her eyes, gripping the edge of the box tightly. "I just wanted to do what is right." The teacher took a deep breath. "And you did. Now we need to make sure the truth is heard." The schoolyard was quiet that afternoon, with only the gentle rustling of the leaves in the trees and the distant chirping of birds breaking the stillness of the atmosphere. Helena gently guided Lily to a wooden bench away from the crowd, shaded by a large tree. The jewelry box remained secure inside the girl's backpack, which she clutched against her chest as if it were both a treasure and a burden. Lily's young face bore a seriousness that did not belong to her age as she settled beside her teacher. "Lily, can you tell me more about these jewels?" Helena asked softly, keeping her voice calm and reassuring despite the gravity of the situation. Her kind eyes met the girl's, offering security and understanding. Lily took a deep breath, her small fingers nervously playing with the hem of her school uniform as she gathered her thoughts. The soft breeze tousled her hair, creating a natural pause before she finally began to speak. "My mom has a lot of jewelry hidden at home," Lily started, her voice quiet but clear. "She always asks me to help her take some when we go to the beauty salon. She says it is our special game." The words flowed naturally now, as if a dam had broken. "She taught me to be discreet, to wait for the right moment when no one was looking. But after what happened to Emma," her voice faltered slightly at the mention of the hairdresser's name, and Helena gently placed her hand over the girl's, encouraging her to continue. The afternoon sun cast shifting patterns through the tree leaves as Lily went on with her story, revealing details that made Helena's heart ache more and more. The little girl described how her mother had planted the necklace in Emma's bag, how she had pretended to cry in court, how she stored all the stolen jewels in secret compartments at home. Each revelation left Lily's lips with the innocence of someone who did not yet fully grasp the weight of her words, but who instinctively knew something was very wrong. "Emma was always so nice to me," Lily continued, her voice barely a whisper, as if saying it out loud would make the pain even more real. Her lower lip trembled, and her small hands clutched the fabric of her uniform tightly, as if she needed something physical to hold on to. "She gave me strawberry candies when my mum was not looking and told funny stories while she did people's hair." She blinked rapidly, trying to keep the tears from falling but failing miserably. Her tear-filled eyes shone in the soft light that filtered through the classroom window. "Now she is in jail," she whispered, as if saying it to herself, trying to absorb the cruelty of the truth. "And it is all our fault." Helena felt her heart tighten, each of the girl's words cutting into her like tiny, invisible blades. The weight of those sentences, spoken with the purity of a child who was finally understanding the full extent of what had happened, was almost unbearable. The teacher watched Lily's small shoulders tremble, her fragile body consumed by guilt she should not have to bear. With a gentle gesture, she leaned in and held the girl's tiny hands between hers, offering silent comfort. "Lily," her voice was soft but firm, "this is not your fault. You were put in a situation no child should ever face. But what matters now is what we are going to do to fix it." Lily sniffled, wiping her eyes with the back of her hands. "Do you think Emma will forgive me?" Helena smiled, squeezing her hands lightly. "I am sure she will, Lily, and together we will make sure she is free again." Helena remained silent for a few moments, observing her young student as she processed the gravity of the situation. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders as she carefully considered her next steps. A rushed decision could not only compromise the case, but also put Lily in an even more delicate position. The soft afternoon breeze rustled the leaves above them, casting dancing shadows that seemed to reflect the turmoil in her thoughts. "Lily," Helena began, choosing her words with extreme care, "you were very brave to show me this. I know it was not an easy decision." Her eyes met the girl's, conveying a sense of security that she herself struggled to feel. The teacher knew she had to act with the same courage her student had shown, but also with the caution the situation demanded. "Now we have to be very careful about what we do next. Do you understand?" she asked gently, watching the child's reaction closely. Lily's small hands nervously gripped the strap of her backpack, where the jewelry box was safely stored, her eyes revealing a mix of fear and hope. Helena continued, her voice maintaining a soothing tone. "For now, I want you to take the box back home and put it exactly where you found it. No one can know that you brought it to school today, not even your mother." The teacher paused, making sure Lily understood the importance of that instruction. "I promise I will find a way to help Emma, but we need to do this the right way." The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, as Helena explained in simple words why they had to be cautious. She knew that every move had to be calculated, every step planned with precision to ensure the truth came to light the right way. "Do you trust me, Lily?" Helena asked, gently holding the girl's hands between hers. The child nodded silently, unshed tears glistening in her eyes. "Then believe me when I say we will do the right thing. We just need a little patience." The shadows in the courtyard stretched long, drawing undefined shapes on the ground as the afternoon breeze made the tree leaves whisper softly. The sky slowly turned into hues of orange and lilac, a silent transition that seemed to mirror the storm of emotions inside Helena. With delicate gestures, the teacher helped Lily place the box back into her backpack, her movements deliberately calm to convey a sense of security that masked her own apprehension. The girl watched closely, her large eyes reflecting a mixture of anxiety and trust. Her small fingers clenched the backpack straps tightly, as if she were trying to hold on not just to the object inside, but also to the courage she had just demonstrated. In her mind, Helena was already formulating a plan, thinking about who could help them resolve the situation in the best possible way. She knew that one wrong move could expose Lily to consequences she should not have to face alone. But on the other hand, the truth had to be told, and the right moment to act was approaching quickly. She knelt down to be at eye level with the girl and adjusted the backpack on Lily's small shoulders, her hands lingering a little longer in the gesture, as if trying to shield her from everything. "Remember, Lily," she finally said, her voice soft but firm, "sometimes doing the right thing takes time, but that does not mean we are not taking action." The girl nodded, absorbing every word. Helena continued, gently holding her tiny hands. "You have already taken the most important first step of all. You decided not to keep this secret alone." Lily took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. "So we are going to make it, right, Ms. Helena?" Helena smiled. "Yes, Lily, we will." Hours later, in a place far less pleasant than an elementary school, the silence of the jail cell was broken only by the distant echo of metal doors slamming and muffled voices of other inmates. Emma sat on her narrow bed, her eyes fixed on the small barred window that barely allowed any evening light to come through. Her fingers, once skilled with scissors and combs, now trembled as they held the only photograph she had managed to bring with her, Margaret smiling on her last birthday. The edges of the picture were worn from being held so often, as if the physical touch could somehow lessen the distance between them. So many days without news from Margaret made Emma's heart ache in a nearly unbearable way. Her attempts to call home only resulted in endless rings with no answer, feeding her worst fears. Emma knew her grandmother needed her daily medication, help moving around, the support that only she could provide. Every minute of silence felt endless, her mind creating increasingly distressing scenarios about Margaret's condition, alone in that apartment. Tears rolled silently down her face as she imagined her grandmother calling for her, needing help and having no one to answer. The metallic clanging of the cell bars being checked marked the passage of time like a relentless clock. Emma had lost track of how many hours she had spent awake, her body exhausted, but her mind refusing to rest. The rough fabric of her prison uniform against her skin was a constant reminder of the injustice that surrounded her. Victoria's words in court still echoed in her ears, each carefully crafted lie now an invisible chain that kept her trapped, separated from everything and everyone she loved. At her kitchen table, phone in hand, Helena took a deep breath as she dialed the number of the lawyer a colleague had recommended. The jewelry box Lily had shown her earlier still occupied her thoughts, every detail of their conversation weighing on her conscience. The phone rang 3 times before a professional voice answered on the other end of the line. "Law Office of Mr. Thompson, good evening," the secretary said. Helena began, her voice firm despite the nervousness she felt. Her fingers gripped the phone tighter than necessary, as if the pressure against the device could suppress the growing anxiety in her chest. "I need to speak with Attorney Thompson about an urgent case. It is about Emma Carter, the hairstylist accused of theft." On the other end of the line there was a brief silence, as if the secretary was processing the information. Helena looked around the room, feeling the weight of the responsibility she carried. The dim lighting made the atmosphere even more suffocating, and the only sound besides her own breathing was the continuous ticking of the clock on the wall. The secretary's voice returned, formal and composed. "Mr. Thompson is busy at the moment. Could you leave your contact information so he can return your call later?" Helena frowned, pressing the phone against her ear as if the simple gesture could convey the urgency of the situation. "No, please. This cannot wait. I have information that could prove Emma Carter's innocence," she insisted, her voice now filled with determination. "But I need to know how to proceed without putting a child involved in the situation at risk." This time, the secretary's hesitation was noticeable. On the other end of the line, Helena could hear the faint sound of pages being turned, perhaps an agenda or notes. The woman seemed to be debating whether to insist on formality or pass on the message immediately. "Please hold for a moment," she finally said, before a click indicated that the call had been placed on hold. Helena sighed and ran a hand through her hair, feeling the cold sweat gathering at the nape of her neck. The phone pressed to her ear felt like a ton, and the silence on the other end only made everything even more suffocating. Every second of waiting felt like a minute, and every minute an eternity. Finally, the muffled sound of movement and another click indicated that the call had been transferred. A deep, professional male voice came through, lacking the impersonal tone of the secretary. After long minutes of waiting, the teacher was finally connected to the lawyer and asked, "Is there a way to protect the child and still use the evidence?" Helena's voice revealed the anxiety she felt. On the other end, Attorney Thompson paused significantly, the sound of papers being shuffled filling the brief silence. When he finally spoke, his tone was carefully measured. "This is a delicate situation, but we have a window of opportunity. The judge has scheduled the final hearing for next week, where Emma's sentence will be determined. If the girl appears at that moment with the evidence in hand, the impact will be much greater." Helena's heart raced as she understood what the lawyer was suggesting. "And what about Lily's protection? She is only 7 years old," she questioned, her maternal concern evident. Thompson took a deep breath before explaining. "If she hands the evidence directly to the judge during the hearing, it will carry significant weight. The court will have to consider not only the physical proof, but also the context in which it is presented. A child taking this initiative, well, it could change everything." Helena gripped the phone tighter, imagining Lily so small and vulnerable facing that situation. "The most important thing," the lawyer continued, his voice now softer, "is that the evidence is presented in a way that protects both Emma and the child. If Lily brings the box directly to the court, it will serve as silent testimony more powerful than any verbal statement. And timing is crucial. At the moment of sentencing, when everyone assumes the case is closed, the impact will be devastating for the prosecution." Helena closed her eyes, picturing the plan unfolding, feeling the weight of the decision she would have to make. "So, this is our best chance?" Helena asked, her voice trembling slightly. "To save Emma and protect Lily at the same time?" The lawyer's response came with certainty. "It is more than that. It is our only chance to ensure justice without exposing the girl too much. The court will have to act in response to the physical evidence, regardless of who brings it forward. And a child doing the right thing, well, that moves even the harshest of judges." The next day, the empty classroom after school hours created a more intimate and welcoming setting as Helena sat with Lily in a small circle formed by 2 desks. The soft light of the late afternoon streamed through the windows, creating golden patterns on the floor that seemed to dance with the occasional breeze. The teacher had chosen this moment carefully, when the noise of the other children had already faded away, so they could talk without interruptions. Lily, with her small hands fidgeting in her lap, looked at her teacher with a mixture of expectation and apprehension. Helena took a deep breath, mentally organizing the words she needed to say in a way a 7-year-old could understand. "Lily, do you remember when we talked about doing the right thing?" she began gently, watching closely for the girl's reaction. "Now we need to talk about how we can help Emma." The hairstylist's name made Lily's eyes widen slightly, her posture shifting to show more attentiveness, as if she instinctively knew something important was about to be discussed. For Emma to be able to leave jail and go back home to take care of her grandmother, the judge needs to see those pieces of jewelry with his own eyes, Helena explained, keeping her voice calm and gentle. "It is like when you have to show me your homework. It is not enough for someone to just say you did it. I need to see it myself, right?" Lily nodded slowly, her eyebrows furrowing in concentration as she tried to process the analogy. The teacher continued, choosing each word with extreme care. "The judge is the same way. He needs to see the jewelry in person to believe that Emma did nothing wrong." The silence that followed was filled only by the distant sounds of birds returning to their nests and the soft hum of the ceiling fan. Lily played absent-mindedly with the hem of her school uniform, her thoughts clearly in turmoil as she tried to grasp the magnitude of what was being proposed. "But what if someone else takes the jewelry?" she finally asked, her voice small but full of curiosity. Helena shook her head gently. "It would not work the same way, sweetheart. Sometimes the truth needs to come from the person who really knows the story. And you are the only one who can tell this story the right way." The last rays of sunlight cast elongated shadows on the walls of the classroom as Helena watched her young student absorb the information. The golden light softly illuminated Lily's face, highlighting the expression of concentration that slightly furrowed her brow. The girl gripped the hem of her blouse between her fingers, an unconscious gesture that revealed her hesitation. It was clear that Lily wanted to help Emma. Her face showed it clearly. Her eyes shone with a mix of determination and nervousness, and her lips parted as if she were about to speak, but hesitated. Helena knew that as brave as Lily was, she was still just a child. The consequences of this act might be too great for her to fully comprehend. The teacher felt her heart tighten as she realized the weight of the responsibility she was placing on such young shoulders. But she knew there was no other way. The truth needed to be told, and only Lily could take that step. Helena took a deep breath, keeping her voice soft and reassuring. "What do you think about this, Lily?" she asked gently, leaning forward slightly, creating a safe space for the girl to express herself. Lily remained silent for a few moments. Her eyes wandered around the room as if searching for answers among the shadows cast by the setting sun. Then she bit her lower lip and lifted her gaze to Helena. I want to do the right thing," she murmured, her voice fragile but resolute. Helena smiled, lightly touching the girl's hand. "And you know that doing the right thing is not always easy, don't you?" Lily slowly nodded. "But Grandpa Henry always said that the truth must be told, even when it hurts." The teacher felt a lump in her throat, and he was absolutely right, Lily. Noticing the growing anxiety in Lily's eyes, Helena gently took the girl's small hands in hers. The classroom, now bathed in the last golden rays of the setting sun, seemed to create a protective cocoon around them. The silence was comforting, broken only by the soft ticking of the clock on the wall and the occasional rustling of the curtains in the evening breeze. Helena knew she needed to choose her next words carefully, balancing the need to reassure her student with the importance of making her understand the gravity of the situation. "Lily, sweetheart, I want you to understand something very important," Helena began, her voice soft but firm. "When we return something that does not belong to us, we are not doing anything wrong. In fact, we are doing something very brave and honest." Her eyes met Lily's, which sparkled with a mixture of fear and determination. "Think of the jewelry as library books. They need to go back to their rightful place, right?" The analogy seemed to resonate with Lily, who relaxed her tense shoulders slightly. Helena continued, keeping her voice calm and reassuring. "If your mother truly has nothing to do with these jewels, then showing the box to the judge will not harm her. But if these jewels do not belong to her..." The teacher paused significantly, allowing the words to settle in. "Then we are helping people recover what is theirs, just as we are helping Emma regain her freedom." Lily's fingers lightly squeezed Helena's hands, and the girl took a deep breath as if gathering all the courage her small body could contain. The moment that followed felt suspended in time as Lily processed everything that had been said. Her eyes scanned the classroom, pausing briefly on the colorful poster about honesty that decorated the wall before returning to her teacher. Slowly, with a maturity beyond her years, she nodded. Words were not necessary. Her gesture carried all the weight of a decision that, even without fully understanding it, she knew was the right one. Helena felt her heart tighten with a mix of pride and concern as she watched her young student show such strength. The girl, so young and fragile, possessed a courage that many adults would never have. Her eyes shone with determination, but behind that firm gaze, Helena could see the weight of the responsibility Lily had taken on. It was as if her childhood had been shortened by the harsh reality she faced. The sunlight created a golden halo around the girl, her slightly disheveled hair catching the soft glow of the evening. It was as if nature itself recognized the importance of that moment, as if the world had paused to witness the bravery of a child who had chosen truth amidst so many lies. Helena swallowed hard, feeling a lump form in her throat. The teacher, who had always sought to protect her students, now found herself facing a dilemma that went beyond the classroom. Her instinct told her to hold Lily's hand and pull her away from all of this, to spare her the pain of confronting her own mother. But at the same time, she knew that denying the girl this choice would be like stripping her of the right to be who she was. "You are very brave, you know that," Helena whispered, her voice filled with emotion. Her hand gently squeezed Lily's, offering her a silent gesture of support. The girl nodded slowly, biting her lip as tears began to form in her eyes. "Would Grandpa Henry be proud of me?" she asked softly. Helena smiled, feeling her own tears well up. "He is already proud of you, Lily. Very much." The next day, the Blake mansion was immersed in a frenzy of activity that night. Victoria paced back and forth in her closet, rehearsing her final testimony for the trial aloud, while dozens of discarded outfits piled up on her bed. Her mind was so focused on perfecting every detail of her performance for the next day that she did not notice Lily's silent movements in the hallway. The girl, with calculated steps she had learned from watching her own mother, slipped into the closet when Victoria went downstairs to take an important phone call. With trembling but determined hands, Lily reached for the jewelry box she had returned to its place without her mother noticing. The weight of the object in her small hands felt even greater now, carrying not only gold and precious stones, but also Emma's fate. With meticulous care, she transferred the box into her school backpack, securing it between her notebooks and books. The sound of Victoria's voice on the phone downstairs masked any noise her movements might have made, creating the perfect auditory cover for her secret mission. Hours later, Victoria adjusted her perfectly chosen grey executive suit, designed to convey seriousness and credibility to the jury. Her reflection in the mirror showed the image of the perfect witness, elegant, composed, and seemingly sincere. She barely noticed when Lily appeared beside her, already dressed for school, holding her backpack with a grip tighter than usual. "Come on, dear," Victoria said absent-mindedly, picking up her case folder with the trial documents. "We need to stop by the courthouse quickly, and then I will take you to school." Lily nodded silently, her small heart pounding with the knowledge that her destination would be very different from what her mother imagined. In the car, while Victoria mentally rehearsed every detail of her testimony, Lily stared out the window with a determination that made her seem much older than her 7 years. The weight of the backpack in her lap, where the jewelry box was once again hidden, seemed to pulse with each beat of her heart. The ability to take things from others allowed Lily to even take things from her own mother without being noticed. When the car stopped in front of the courthouse, Lily took a deep breath, gathering all the courage a child could have. Her small feet would guide her into the courtroom, where Emma's fate would be decided, carrying with her the evidence that could change everything. Victoria, distracted by her own thoughts and plans, walked with calculated elegance, her high heels echoing against the cold courthouse floor. Her eyes scanned the hall without truly seeing it, immersed in her well-rehearsed strategy to reinforce her position as a victim. Nothing seemed more important than maintaining her untouchable, flawless image, as it had always been. She did not notice the small pair of eyes watching her every move. She failed to see the hesitation on Lily's face, or the way the child's fingers clenched the straps of her backpack as if carrying an invisible weight far heavier than she could bear. The girl took a deep breath, feeling her heart hammer against her chest as she looked at her mother's poised figure, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. Victoria moved forward, entirely oblivious to the fact that her carefully constructed facade was about to crumble at the hands of her own daughter. The courtroom felt like a distant world to her, a stage where only her voice mattered. But for Lily, that place had become the battlefield where her conscience and loyalty would be tested. The girl walked with small but determined steps toward the imposing courthouse. The colossal structure loomed over her, its stone pillars whispering stories of truths revealed and lies unmasked. The muffled hum of conversations filled the space, a constant murmur blending with the occasional clatter of keyboard strokes and the rustling of documents. Lily paused for a moment, her gaze landing on the massive emblem of justice carved above the main entrance. Her heartbeat quickened even more. Everything inside her told her this was the right thing to do, but fear whispered in her mind, trying to convince her to turn back. Then her grandfather Henry's voice echoed softly in her memory. Doing the right thing is not always easy, but it is always the right path to take. A shiver ran down her spine. Henry always said that when teaching her about honesty, when he held her in his arms and told stories about how a person's character was worth more than any wealth. Lily remembered the firmness in his voice, the brightness in his eyes when he spoke of integrity. Swallowing hard, the girl clutched the backpack tighter against her chest and resumed walking. Her gaze flickered toward Victoria, who was now speaking with one of the attorneys, her gestures calculated, her expression trained to appear serene and confident. How could her mother lie so well? How could she stand there, pretending to be a victim while Emma paid for something she did not do? Lily's stomach churned, but she did not stop. The weight of the stolen jewelry inside the backpack seemed to grow heavier with each step, as if she carried the truth itself in her hands. Her small body trembled, but she forced herself to keep going. The courtroom was completely packed on that decisive morning, the air thick with the accumulated tension of weeks of trial. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting intricate patterns on the polished wooden floor, illuminating the tense expressions of those present. The dark oak benches creaked occasionally under the shifting weight of spectators adjusting in their seats, while nervous whispers filled the space. The judge's entrance instantly silenced the room, her firm steps echoing as she took her place behind the imposing desk. The prosecutor began her closing argument with studied confidence, her clear and precise voice cutting through the room's silence. "Your Honor, the facts are crystal clear. We have a strong eyewitness testimony, undeniable physical evidence, and a history that suggests premeditation." Her gestures were controlled and precise as she moved in front of the jury, each word chosen to reinforce the image of Emma as a cunning criminal. The defendant took advantage of the trust placed in her, betraying not only Mrs. Blake but every client of the establishment. Emma's public defender, though initially appearing less imposing, rose with renewed determination. His arguments, carefully built throughout the trial, began exposing the weaknesses in the prosecution's narrative. "Your Honor, the prosecution bases its entire case on circumstantial evidence and the testimony of a single person. There are no security cameras capturing the moment of the alleged theft, no fingerprints on the jewelry found, and my client's impeccable record speaks for itself." His voice gained strength as he dismantled point by point the accusations presented. Emma remained seated, her hands tightly clasped in her lap to conceal the trembling that overtook them. Her prison uniform, clean but clearly worn, contrasted sharply with Victoria's elegant suit as she observed the proceedings with an almost imperceptible smile on her lips. The glances Victoria occasionally cast toward Emma were calculated to intimidate, small silent reminders of her power and influence. Yet Emma sat upright, refusing to bow, even when her eyes betrayed the fear and uncertainty consuming her. The defense continued its argument, highlighting the inconsistencies in the witness testimonies and questioning the lack of material evidence beyond the supposedly found necklace. How can someone with such an exemplary history, responsible for caring for her sick grandmother, risk everything for a single theft? Why are there no records of suspicious sales? No sign of money obtained from previous crimes? Each question seemed to resonate with the thoughtful expressions of the jurors, who furiously took notes on their pads. Tension reached its peak when the judge began organizing her documents, preparing to deliver her decision. The silence that fell over the courtroom was almost palpable, broken only by the occasional creak of the wooden benches and the soft rustling of papers. Victoria adjusted herself in her seat, confidence emanating from every pore, while Emma briefly closed her eyes, a silent prayer escaping her lips. The judge raised the gavel, the metal gleaming under the sunlight streaming through the windows, the moment of truth finally arriving after weeks of legal battle. The silence preceding the verdict was abruptly shattered by a child's voice that echoed through the courtroom, freezing everyone in their places. "Wait, Your Honor." The clear and determined sound cut through the tense air like a sharp blade. Lily, her small figure clad in a pristine school uniform, rose from the audience bench, clutching her backpack firmly against her chest. The courtroom, once engulfed in respectful silence, erupted into murmurs of surprise as all eyes turned to the girl. Victoria, who just moments before had displayed a victorious posture, felt a cold chill run down her spine. Her eyes widened in a mix of shock and dread as she recognized her daughter. In a sudden movement, she rose from her chair, the sharp sound of her heels against the wooden floor echoing through the room. "Lily, what are you doing? Sit down now." Her voice, usually controlled and melodious, now carried an urgency and panic she could not disguise. The sophisticated veneer Victoria had maintained throughout the trial was visibly cracking. Little Lily, however, remained firm. Her small body trembled visibly, but her eyes shone with a determination that strikingly resembled her grandfather Henry. "Calm down, Mom. I need to do what is right, just like Grandpa used to." Her voice, though soft, carried a strength that instantly silenced all whispers in the room. Victoria's face lost all color upon hearing the mention of her father, while Emma, from the defendant's bench, watched the scene with a mix of astonishment and concern, her eyes darting rapidly between mother and daughter. With small but resolute steps, Lily began walking toward the judge's bench. The sound of her school shoes against the floor echoed in the sepulchral silence that had fallen over the courtroom. Each step seemed to last an eternity as the spectators held their breath, instinctively sensing they were about to witness something extraordinary. Victoria, paralyzed in her place, watched in growing horror as her elaborate scheme began to unravel before her eyes. "Your Honor," Lily continued, her voice trembling slightly but gaining strength as she spoke, "we need to return these jewels to their rightful owners. That is the right thing to do." The silence that engulfed the courtroom was absolute, as if even the air had stopped moving to witness the moment. Every eye was fixed on the small girl, whose fragile body was barely strong enough to carry the weight of the truth she was now unveiling before justice. Her tiny hands hesitated for a moment before opening the school backpack, as if in that simple gesture lay the courage of a lifetime. When the ornate box was revealed, a murmur rippled through the room. The gleam of the stolen jewels reflected the natural light pouring through the tall courthouse windows, creating a spectacle of colors that danced across the walls, a cruel contrast between the beauty of those objects and the dark burden of their illicit origin. Victoria, sitting at the witness stand, felt a shiver run down her spine. Her gaze froze on the image of her daughter holding that box, exposing her guilt before the entire courtroom. The ground beneath her feet seemed to crumble. Her chest rose and fell with short, trembling breaths, and then, almost instinctively, she took an involuntary step toward her daughter. But before she could get closer, she felt a firm hand on her shoulder. The court officer, attentive to every movement, stopped her before she could intervene. The once composed face of Victoria now visibly displayed the panic of someone watching her carefully constructed world collapse piece by piece. The judge leaned forward in her chair, her eyebrows furrowed in an expression of intense interest as she observed the small figure before her. "What are these jewels, young lady?" she asked in a softened voice, recognizing the evident tension in the child's shoulders. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath, creating a silence so deep that the soft clinking of the jewels was audible as Lily fully opened her school backpack. "Mom took them from the salon." Lily's voice echoed through the room, her words laden with a painful truth that made Victoria visibly stagger in her place. She always said she deserved something better, and that no one would miss a few pretty things. The girl's words cut through the air like small blades, each one striking Victoria with growing force. The prosecutor, who moments earlier had been confident in her victory, approached the box hesitantly, her hands trembling slightly as she examined its contents. Victoria's face drained of all color as she watched her meticulously crafted world collapse piece by piece. Her eyes, once so controlled and calculating, now darted frantically around the room in search of an escape that did not exist. The rising panic on her face was visible to all present, culminating in a dramatic moment when her legs buckled and she collapsed onto the courtroom floor. The dull thud of her fall was followed by an explosion of excited voices and sudden movement. Officers rushed to assist Victoria as the judge banged her gavel repeatedly, demanding order in the courtroom. The momentary chaos was interrupted when Victoria regained consciousness, her eyes immediately focusing on Lily. In a sudden and desperate movement, she tried to reach for her daughter, but was restrained by the officers surrounding her. "This is absurd. She is just a child. She is lying." Her hysterical screams echoed off the courtroom walls, her voice breaking in despair as she struggled against the hands holding her back. The judge observed the scene with a stern expression, her voice cutting through the air like steel when she finally spoke. "Miss Victoria, based on the new evidence presented, I order your preventive arrest for theft, fraud, and false accusation." The metallic sound of the handcuffs locking around Victoria's wrists seemed to seal her fate as she continued to struggle, refusing to accept the reality unfolding before her. Lily, standing in the middle of the courtroom with silent tears streaming down her young face, whispered words that seemed to carry the weight of the world. "I'm sorry, Mom, but I did what Grandpa would have done." Emma, who had watched the entire scene in stunned silence, felt tears roll down her face as the judge declared her innocence and ordered her immediate release. For a moment she was paralyzed, unable to believe what she had just heard. The tension of the past days seemed to suddenly dissipate, leaving in its place an overwhelming mix of relief, disbelief, and urgency. Her chest rose and fell unevenly, her lungs gasping for air as if they had forgotten how to breathe. The courtroom was in turmoil. Murmurs and surprised expressions came from all sides, but Emma heard nothing. Her only thought was beyond those cold walls, beyond the rows of wooden chairs and the gazes of strangers. Margaret. Without waiting another second, she stood up with almost desperate urgency and rushed toward the courtroom exit. Her hurried footsteps echoed through the marble corridors, the sound of her shoes striking the cold floor, matching the frantic rhythm of her racing heart. Every second felt like an eternity as she made her way to the main door, her breath uneven with anxiety. Upon exiting the building, she was met by the harsh glare of the afternoon sun. The brightness made her eyes water even more, and she instinctively raised her hand to shield them. The fresh air filled her lungs, but there was no time to relish the feeling of freedom. Her eyes scanned the street ahead, searching for a taxi, a bus, anything that could get her home faster. "Taxi!" she shouted, her voice hoarse with nervousness. She raised her hand, desperate to catch the attention of any available driver. A yellow car slowed down and stopped in front of her, and Emma practically leapt inside before the driver could even ask for the destination. "Angel Street, number 327, please, as fast as you can," she said in a trembling voice, her words tumbling out in a rush. The driver, a middle-aged man with a tired expression, gave her a brief glance in the rearview mirror before shifting gears. "All right, miss, but take a deep breath or you might pass out back there," he remarked, noticing the tension on her face. Emma did not respond. Her fingers were white from clutching her purse against her chest. Her legs moved nervously, her gaze fixed on the cityscape that blurred past the window. The streets of the city, which had once seemed like mere backdrops in her daily life, now felt like miles of distance between her and the only person that mattered. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to contain the flood of chaotic thoughts threatening to overwhelm her. How was Margaret? Had someone helped her? Was her grandmother still waiting for her, worried, unaware of what had happened? Or no. Emma refused to think of the worst possibility. The ride lasted only a few minutes, but it felt like hours. When the taxi turned onto her familiar street, Emma leaned forward, her heart hammering painfully against her ribs. "Stop here, please!" Emma's heart pounded erratically as she hurried up the stairs of the building where she lived with Margaret. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighed down by the accumulated anxiety and concern of the past few days. The familiar hallway had never seemed so long, and her hands trembled as she turned the key in the lock. When she finally opened the door, the sight of her grandmother sitting in her favorite armchair, pale but with a radiant smile, made all the tears she had held back during the trial finally spill over. "Emma, my dear," Margaret exclaimed in a weak but emotional voice, reaching out her trembling arms toward her granddaughter. Emma rushed to her, kneeling by her side and burying her face in her lap, just as she had done as a child. The familiar scent of her grandmother's soft perfume mixed with the aroma of the medicine on the side table, painfully reminding her of how long she had been away. Margaret stroked Emma's hair with trembling hands, whispering words of gratitude as silent tears ran down her wrinkled face. A gentle knock on the door interrupted their reunion. The owner of the salon stood at the entrance, her face marked with deep regret. "Emma, I came to ask for forgiveness." Her choked voice revealed the sincerity of her words. "I should never have doubted you. Never should have let that woman manipulate all of us like that." Emma slowly stood up, observing the former boss who now seemed so different from the severe person who had fired her without hesitation. The conversation that followed brought not only apologies but also news that would change the course of their lives. The compensation for the time she had been unjustly imprisoned would be substantial, enough to fulfill a dream Emma had barely allowed herself to have. Her eyes sparkled as she shared her plans with Margaret. A salon of her own, where she could work with dignity and independence, ensuring a better future for both of them. Her grandmother squeezed her hand with surprising strength, her eyes shining with pride and love. The following months passed in a whirlwind of activity. Emma found the perfect space for her salon not far from home, allowing Margaret to visit easily. Every detail was carefully planned, from the colors of the walls to the arrangement of the equipment. When the grand opening day finally arrived, Margaret was there, seated in a specially placed chair, where she could watch the salon's movement. Her tears of happiness reflected the golden letters on the storefront that announced, "Salon Emma, Beauty with Love." Now looking at her salon completely full, Emma felt a peace she had not experienced in a long time. The atmosphere was filled with a welcoming warmth, where the sweet scent of hair products blended with the soft fragrance of fresh flowers on the reception counter. The large windows allowed the golden afternoon light to flood in, illuminating the gleaming mirrors and reflecting the vibrant energy of the space that, for so long, had been just a distant dream. The sound of lively conversations among clients mixed with the hum of hairdryers and the soft clinking of work utensils. Laughter echoed between the mirrors, and the atmosphere was light, filled with gratitude and achievements. It was hard to believe that months ago everything had been on the brink, that she had almost lost everything due to an unjust accusation. But now, every detail of the salon represented her victory, her strength, and her perseverance. Margaret, seated in her special spot near the reception, held a cup of tea in her trembling hands, smiling proudly as she watched her granddaughter work. Her eyes shone with a tenderness that only a loving grandmother could carry, and her chest swelled with pride, seeing Emma lead her team with confidence and care. Emma found herself smiling too, absorbing that moment as a silent reward for all the nights of anguish, for all the fears she had overcome. She knew that they had finally found not just stability, but also the justice they had long awaited. And above all, they had each other, stronger than ever. Lily's maternal grandmother's house was entirely different from the mansion where she had lived with Victoria. The walls, painted in soft tones, were decorated with family photographs, some yellowed by time, others more recent, creating a visual narrative of shared memories. The aroma of freshly baked cookies constantly filled the air, blending with the gentle fragrance of the garden flowers that drifted in through the kitchen window. It was a smaller, simpler home, but it carried a warmth Lily had never experienced before. "So you were so much like your grandfather Henry," her grandmother often commented, her eyes glistening with held-back tears as she watched Lily play in the garden or do her homework at the kitchen table. "He always said that doing the right thing was more important than anything else in the world. And you, my little one, have shown that you have that same strength inside you." Lily absorbed these words like a flower absorbs sunlight, gradually feeling safer in her new environment, where she could simply be a child. Days at her grandmother's house followed a calm and comforting rhythm, vastly different from the frantic pace that had marked her previous life. Mornings began with breakfast prepared with love, relaxed conversations about the day's plans, and hugs that seemed to last forever. Slowly, Lily's once reserved and cautious smile began appearing more frequently, illuminating her face with a genuine joy that made her grandmother's heart overflow with love. During a particularly beautiful walk in the park, under the shade of a lush tree, Lily finally found the courage to express her deepest feelings. "Grandma," she began, her voice small but firm, "sometimes I miss Mom. Even knowing she did wrong things, I still love her." The confession hung in the air like a delicate, vulnerable soap bubble. Her grandmother pulled her closer, her arms offering the comfort that words alone could not provide. "My love," her grandmother replied gently, choosing her words carefully, "we cannot always change the people we love, no matter how much we wish to, but we can learn from their mistakes and choose to be different." Her fingers softly wiped away a lone tear that rolled down Lily's face. "Your love for your mother shows that you have a kind heart, and that is something precious. But you have already shown that you have the courage to make different choices, to follow a better path." Her grandmother's words were a balm for Lily's wounded heart, offering both understanding and direction. Sitting on the park swing, Lily swayed lightly, letting the tips of her shoes trace small grooves in the soft earth. The warm afternoon breeze gently tousled her hair as the sound of children's laughter echoed around, mixing with the distant chirping of birds. Her eyes watched the other children running across the grass, their cheerful voices creating a melody of innocence and freedom that had once felt so far from her reality. With a sigh, her small fingers touched the bracelet her grandfather Henry had given her. The cool texture of the metal contrasted with the warmth of her skin, and she traced each detail of the engraving with her fingertips. It was more than just a piece of jewelry. It was a reminder of everything he had taught her, of all the kind words and silent lessons that had shaped her heart. She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to relive the memories of when her grandfather held her in his arms, telling stories about courage and honesty. "The truth can be hard, little one, but it is always the best path," he used to say, his voice both firm and full of love. A soft but determined smile illuminated Lily's face as she opened her eyes again. She watched the other children playing joyfully, and for the first time in a long while felt light. In her heart, a certainty began to form. She could love her mother and still choose to be different. She could honor Henry's teachings by building her own path, one guided not by fear or lies, but by truth and the courage to do what was right. News of Victoria Blake's arrest spread like wildfire through the social circles she once frequented. Local newspapers ran sensational headlines about the socialite who had used her own daughter in her criminal schemes, while social media buzzed with outraged comments from people who had been deceived by her sophisticated facade. Online discussion groups shared stories of missing items during visits to the salon, and former friends rushed to give interviews, claiming they had always suspected her questionable behavior. At the beauty salon, clients gathered in small groups, sharing their own experiences with Victoria. "She was always so convincing," they remarked, revisiting old memories with newfound clarity. "She could make anyone believe her stories, always playing the victim." The shock was even greater when they realized how long they had been manipulated, how their suspicions had been silenced by Victoria's calculated charm and seemingly impeccable social standing. The contrast between her previous life and her new reality could not have been more brutal. In the women's detention center, Victoria faced a world entirely different from the one she had known. The intake process was particularly humiliating. Her designer clothes were replaced with a rough, ill-fitting orange uniform, her carefully catalogued jewelry was confiscated, and her beauty products were deemed unnecessary luxuries. Every privilege she had taken for granted was systematically stripped away, leaving her not only without possessions, but also without the carefully constructed identity she had built. The other inmates watched her arrival with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Their stares pierced through the mask of superiority Victoria tried to maintain, as if they could see through the layers of pretense she had crafted over the years. Within those cold grey walls, her last name meant nothing, her money could not buy favors, and her meticulously cultivated appearance quickly deteriorated under the harsh fluorescent lights. In her sparse cell, Victoria struggled to adapt to the new routine. The thin, hard mattress was a constant reminder of her social downfall, as was the lack of privacy in the communal bathroom and the meals served on plastic trays. The silence of the night was broken only by the distant sounds of metal doors clanging and voices echoing through the corridors. Without her expensive creams and beauty treatments, her skin began showing signs of stress, and her once impeccably styled hair lost its shine under the limited care allowed in prison. Sitting alone in her cell, Victoria found a small shard of broken glass, likely a remnant of an old mirror. The cold, jagged object trembled slightly in her fingers as she lifted it to examine her reflection. The image staring back at her was a blur of shadows and fractured light, distorted by the cracks in the surface, a cruel metaphor for her current life. Her eyes, once filled with arrogance and unwavering confidence, now appeared dull and sunken, encircled by dark circles carved by sleepless nights and countless moments of regret. The pallor of her skin, deprived of the expensive cosmetics she once religiously applied, emphasized her haggard appearance. Fine lines marked her forehead and the corners of her lips, as if the past months had aged her by years. For a moment, the shard of glass slipped from her fingers, landing on the floor with a muted clink. She did not immediately move to pick it up. Instead, she stared at the small object, her mind drifting through the fragments of her former life. She imagined herself in front of the mirror in her old dressing room, adjusting a diamond earring while choosing which luxurious gown to wear to her next event. The designer clothes, the envious glances from the women around her, the superficial conversations over expensive champagne, all of it seemed so distant now, as if it had belonged to someone else entirely. She slowly leaned down and picked up the glass again, running her fingers along its uneven edge. The rough touch of the fractured surface sent a shiver down her spine. Perhaps that broken mirror had more to say about her than any clear, perfect reflection ever had. The woman she once was no longer existed. The court had exposed her, the lies she told herself had unraveled, and now all that remained was this pale shadow imprisoned, reduced to an orange uniform, without a name, without jewels, without status. The tears she had fought so hard to suppress finally began to fall, dampening her cold skin. Her shoulders trembled slightly, and she clutched the glass tighter, as if the object were the only thing anchoring her to the present. The reality of all she had lost, her money, her power, her privileges, struck her like a harsh blow to the chest. But nothing hurt more than the absence of Lily. She closed her eyes, trying to push away the image of her daughter looking at her with those eyes so much like Henry's, filled with disappointment, but also with love. How could Lily still love her? How had that child found the courage to do what Victoria herself had never been able to? Victoria knew the answer: Henry. Her late husband had left in Lily a legacy far stronger than any influence Victoria had ever held over the girl. And now Lily would grow up far from her. She would learn to live without seeking her mother's approval, without depending on her whims and manipulations. Would she miss the mother she once knew? Or would she only feel relieved to no longer bear the weight of Victoria's secrets? The thought of being forgotten burned inside Victoria like a slow, cruel fire. Because deep down, that was what frightened her more than prison, more than poverty, more than society's scorn. Being erased, becoming irrelevant, fading from Lily's memories, reduced to nothing more than a shadow in her daughter's past. She looked at the glass again, feeling a tight knot in her throat. For a brief second, she considered pressing the sharp edge against the skin of her wrist. The thought came and went, fleeting as lightning, but real enough to make her drop the glass abruptly. The object hit the floor, shattering into even smaller pieces. Victoria swallowed hard, breathing heavily. No, that would be cowardice. She deserved to endure every second of her punishment. She needed to feel the weight of her choices, of every lie, of every deception. With trembling hands, she pushed the shards of glass away with her foot, also pushing away the dark thoughts that threatened to consume her. If Lily had been strong enough to face the truth, then perhaps, just perhaps, Victoria could learn to bear her own burden. She slowly lay down on the narrow bed and turned her face toward the small barred window high on the wall. The moonlight filtered in weakly, casting a pale glow on the concrete floor. She closed her eyes and, for the first time, allowed the tears to flow freely. That night, Victoria cried for everything she had lost. But most of all, she cried for everything she had wasted. The corridor of the women's wing echoed, with the monotonous sound of metal doors slamming and keys jangling. creating a somber symphony that blended with the persistent scent of industrial disinfectant and dampness. The walls, once white, now displayed a yellowish tint from years of humidity and neglect. The rusted bars groaned in protest every time they were opened or closed, as if reminding the inmates of their constant, unchanging presence. Victoria, sitting in her narrow cell, stared at those bars with sunken, lifeless eyes, so different from the proud eyes that had once appraised fine jewelry in expensive boutiques. Her orange uniform, as wrinkled as her current existence, hung loosely on her now thin and fragile frame. Her once silky and perfectly styled hair had lost all its shine, falling lifelessly over shoulders weighed down by the invisible burden of guilt and regret. Her hands, which had once displayed expensive rings and flawlessly manicured nails, now trembled slightly as they flipped through the worn pages of a book she could no longer concentrate on reading. The occasional reflection she caught in the metallic surfaces of the cell showed a woman unrecognizable, even to herself. The nights were the worst. When the lights went out and the oppressive silence of the prison settled in, Victoria's thoughts screamed in her mind with deafening intensity. Memories of the trial played on an endless loop. The moment Lily stood up, the jewelry box being revealed, her own desperate voice trying to deny the undeniable. Each recollection was a stab to her heart, but none hurt more than the absence of her daughter. The empty space during visiting hours was her real punishment, far crueler than the grey walls surrounding her. In the first months of incarceration, Victoria clung stubbornly to her arrogance as a shield against reality. She denied her guilt, fabricated justifications, convinced herself that she was the victim of an injustice. But time, relentless in its mission to reveal truths, gradually peeled away the layers of self-deception she had built. Each day brought a new painful realization about the extent of her mistakes, about how she had not only stolen material objects, but had also robbed her own daughter of innocence, using her as a tool in her crimes. The weight of her choices crushed her a little more each day. Victoria now understood that she was no longer the powerful woman she had once been, the one who walked into rooms demanding attention and respect. Within the prison walls, she was just another inmate, indistinguishable from the others in her orange uniform, forgotten by the world she had once conquered with her manipulative charm. Her days dragged on in a monotonous routine, marked only by the growing awareness of everything she had lost due to her greed. The sound of firm, measured footsteps echoing down the hallway interrupted her dark thoughts, pulling her back to the cold and oppressive reality of her cell. The metallic jingle of keys announced the presence of someone approaching, and Victoria lifted her gaze, still lost in thought. A guard stopped in front of the bars, his expressionless face reflecting the mechanical routine of that environment. Without any emotion, he slid a small folded note through the bars. "Blake, you have a visitor," he announced with professional indifference, as if delivering an ordinary message. Victoria blinked several times, trying to process the words. Her chest rose and fell with a heavy breath as her hesitant fingers picked up the note. The yellowed, slightly crumpled paper trembled in her hands, as if it carried a weight beyond its fragile structure. Her heart began pounding in her chest, each beat echoing like a drum inside her head. Her eyes anxiously scanned the piece of paper, trying to decipher who could have come to visit her after so long immersed in solitude. Could it be Lily? The mere possibility formed a knot in her throat. She had lost hope that her daughter would want to see her, but perhaps, just perhaps, there was a chance to mend what had been broken. She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering the courage to face whatever awaited her in the visiting room. Taking a deep breath, she tried to steady her trembling hands and stood up slowly, preparing herself for an encounter that could change everything. The prison visiting room was an austere and impersonal environment, dominated by a simple metal table and chairs seemingly designed to ensure discomfort for its occupants. The aroma of cold coffee, mixed with the characteristic smell of industrial disinfectant, creating a heavy atmosphere, punctuated only by the muffled murmur of other conversations around. Victoria adjusted herself on the hard chair, her restless hands repeatedly smoothing over the fabric of her orange uniform, while her eyes remained fixed on the entrance door, each second of waiting feeling like an eternity. The sound of the door opening made her heart stop for a moment. Lily entered first, her small hand firmly clasped in her maternal grandmother's. Victoria felt the air escape her lungs at the sight of her daughter, The girl had grown over the past months. Her eyes shone with a vitality Victoria had not seen in a long time, and her rosy cheeks revealed a health and happiness that starkly contrasted with the memories of their last encounter. The grandmother accompanying her held a dignified and upright posture, her gaze carrying a wisdom acquired through years of experience, without showing any trace of the resentment Victoria had so feared. "Hi, Mom." Lily's soft voice broke the silence, accompanied by a timid smile that filled Victoria's eyes with tears. "Hi, my little one," she responded, her voice hoarse with emotion, struggling to hold back the sob that threatened to spill over. The moment felt suspended in time, laden with the weight of all the unspoken words and accumulated regrets from months of separation. Victoria took a deep breath, gathering the courage to do something she had never done before: admit her mistakes. "I was wrong, Lily," she began, her voice trembling with the force of the truth she was finally able to express. "I did so many things wrong, and you were stronger than I ever was." The words scraped her throat as they came out, but they carried a relief she hadn't realized she needed so much. Lily lowered her head, her small hands nervously playing with the hem of her blouse, while her grandmother observed the scene in silence, her face a mask of contained understanding. Victoria then turned her attention to the older woman, swallowing the last remnants of the pride that had blinded her for so long. "Thank you for taking care of her," she said, her voice choked with emotion, "for teaching her the way Henry would have." The mention of her late husband's name brought a fresh wave of emotion to the surface. The grandmother responded with just a nod, but her gaze conveyed more than words could express: understanding, acceptance, and a silent promise to continue guiding Lily down the right path. With trembling hands, Victoria took a folded piece of paper from her pocket, feeling the rough texture of the worn-out paper beneath her fingers. It was a small yellowed sheet, carefully folded so many times that the creases were nearly tearing it apart. It was the only physical remnant she had kept of what mattered most. She took a deep breath, hesitating for a moment. Her eyes landed on Lily's face, who watched her with a mixture of curiosity and caution. The time between them had stretched like an abyss, and Victoria knew she could not bridge it with words. But perhaps, just perhaps, that drawing could be a small step. She unfolded the paper slowly, revealing the image she had created during the long, lonely nights inside her cold cell. The lines were simple, almost childlike, drawn with the stub of a pencil she had traded for an uneaten meal. On the sheet, Lily and Henry stood hand in hand, smiling beneath a scribbled blue sky. The grandfather, with his round glasses and kind smile, held the little girl in his arms just as he had done countless times before. As she handed the drawing to her daughter, Victoria felt as if she were also handing over a piece of her heart, a silent promise, an unspoken apology. Even though she had failed as a mother, she would never stop loving her little girl. Lily took the paper delicately, her eyes filling with silent tears. She held it against her chest without saying anything, but in that instant, Victoria knew that somehow her love still existed there. The loneliness of the cell felt even deeper after the visit, as Victoria held onto the small piece of paper Lily had left for her. The imperfect, childish handwriting formed a simple yet powerful message: "Mommy, I love you." For a moment, Victoria just stared at the words as if trying to absorb every stroke, every curve of the letters her daughter had drawn. Then, like a dam finally breaking under excessive pressure, something inside her shattered and the tears she had held back for so long began to flow freely. Sitting on her narrow bed, Victoria let the sobs shake her body, releasing all the anger, all the pride, and all the arrogance that had been her constant companions for so many years. The tears cleansed her soul like purifying rain, washing away the layers of pretense and vanity she had built around herself. For the first time since she had been imprisoned, she allowed herself to truly feel, not just the pain of loss, but also a different kind of pride, a pure pride for her daughter's courage and honesty. The dim light filtering through the small cell window created dancing patterns on the grey walls as Victoria reflected on how Lily had become everything Henry had ever wanted: strong, full of integrity, able to distinguish right from wrong, even when it meant standing against her own mother. The lesson her late husband had instilled had taken deep root in their granddaughter's heart, blossoming into a wisdom far beyond her young years. Victoria now realized with painful clarity that her daughter was following a very different path from her own, one illuminated by the values Henry had cherished so deeply. Her strange sense of relief began to mix with her sadness. Even though she was condemned, even though she had lost her freedom, Victoria found comfort in knowing that Lily would be raised in a home filled with true love and solid values. Through the small barred window of her cell, she watched as Lily and her grandmother left the prison, their tiny silhouettes moving beneath the golden afternoon sunlight. The image of their intertwined hands, of her daughter's confident posture, etched itself into Victoria's memory as a silent testament that sometimes the greatest victories are born from the most painful defeats. Victoria remained at the window until the two figures disappeared completely from view, feeling a bittersweet mix of loss and hope. The prison corridor was silent, except for the distant echo of conversations between inmates in the cafeteria. The smell of disinfectant mixed with the stagnant air, creating an oppressive atmosphere that had felt unbearable for so many months. But now, for the first time, the silence did not terrify her. With tears still streaming down her face, she whispered words that were both a farewell and a prayer. "I love you, Lily, and thank you, Henry, for never letting our granddaughter forget what is right." The paper with Lily's message still rested in her trembling hands, as if it were the last anchor tying her to the world outside. The thin, crumpled sheet, with its lovingly scribbled letters, carried more weight than any jewel she had ever stolen. Her fingers traced over the worn-out surface, following each curve of the words, "Mommy, I love you," trying to absorb the love that somehow still remained despite everything she had done. Victoria sighed deeply and slowly turned, walking toward her small concrete bed covered by the thin mattress that barely cushioned the weight of her guilt. She sat at the edge, looking at the place she now called home. Concrete walls marked with the names and dates of former inmates, the toilet without any privacy in the corner of the cell, the rough blanket that had become her only refuge against the cold nights. Everything around her reminded her of the abyss she had fallen into. She ran her fingers through her disheveled hair, feeling its dry, lifeless strands. Once her greatest concern had been maintaining an impeccable appearance. Now mirrors were just distorted metal surfaces, reflecting an unrecognizable image. She looked at her hands, once adorned with expensive rings and bracelets, now empty, her nails unpolished, her skin roughened by the cheap soap she used to wash the prison clothes. For so long, she had believed that the world revolved around appearance, status, and power. She had believed she could manipulate anyone with her charm and persuasion, but her daughter, so small, so fragile, had been stronger than she had ever been. Victoria took a deep breath, feeling a strange weight in her chest. Not the usual despair, not fear. It was something deeper, harder to name. Perhaps it was genuine regret. Perhaps it was acceptance. For the first time, there was no one to impress, no mask to maintain. She lay down slowly, turning toward the small barred window that allowed a sliver of moonlight to enter her cell. She closed her eyes and imagined Lily in her new home, with her grandmother, surrounded by the love she had always deserved. She pictured the girl running through the garden, playing freely without having to carry the weight of her mother's secrets and lies. The thought brought a tightness to her chest, but at the same time, a strange relief. Lily was safe. Lily was happy, and somehow, even within these walls, Victoria felt a little freer. Though the bars still surrounded her, and the years of her sentence still stretched before her, she had finally found a kind of freedom. The freedom that comes with acceptance, sincere remorse, and the certainty that, even through her mistakes, something good had flourished. With one last look at the note in her hands, Victoria carefully folded it and placed it under her thin pillow. She closed her eyes, and for the first time since arriving in this place, allowed herself to sleep without the unbearable weight of denial. Outside, the world continued to turn, and for the first time she did not try to control it. She simply let it go. Did you enjoy Emma and Lily's story? Then subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and check out the next one waiting for you on the screen. See you there.